And the chances of them meeting and being able to spend time together were very few. They met, were extremely touched by this meeting. So they sat down across the table facing each other, and they had a little, one of those little bottles of vodka. Right over here they give out as samples. They had it standing on the table, poured a little bit in their cups, and they huh?
What place is this?
In Russia.
I want to go there.
You don't want to go there.
I want to go there.
You want to go there. And they sat, and they looked at each other, didn't say a word. They sat the whole night, didn't touch the vodka. They sat the whole night. In the morning, they poured the vodka back into the bottle, and that was the end of the Fabrengen.
I'm not giving this coffee back.
Your first test is to sit a whole night without saying a word.
Is it because there was like, KGB around? They were like quiet? Like, why didn't they?
No. They had enough to talk to, they had enough insight and enough understanding of each other that by looking at each other they were able to connect and communicate. Amazing, isn't it?
Cool.
It's hot, it's not cool. All right. We're back to our routine. We missed last week. The Pasha of the week, this is what we speak about on Tuesday, and try to get some insight based on the Rebbe's Sichos and others sources, and then try to translate it and apply it to ourselves and see how we fit into this and how we can learn from this, or how we can be encouraged from this. So the Pasha of the week, is Pasha Beshalach, which speaks right off of the initial moment when the beginning, the first. This is good. Everybody should know that if you don't understand something, a word or something, please stop right away so that you don't get lost or I don't lose you. When they left Egypt, Paro sent them out of Egypt, of Mitzrayim, bondage. And then began the trek, the movement of Eden out of Mitzrayim. And right off on the start, the Torah tells that there was special plotting, special planning of how Hashem was leading the Eden. He didn't take them to the land of through Plishtim. He took straight into Eretz Canaan. He took them different routes. And then not only took them to different routes, but they went zigzagging. They were going back and forth. All this was with a profound plan. As you know, that Rashi explains that when Eden left Mitzrayim, they never requested. Moshe never requested Paro should let the Eden go permanently. The request was that he should let him go for 3 days, and then we'll come back. And Paro, therefore, sent along, even though he was smitten and he was forced to let him go, he still wouldn't give up, and he sent along agents, his agents, his representatives, And they went along with the Yidden. And as soon as the agents saw that Yidden are not planning to go back to Mitzrayim, and furthermore, that they were kind of going without a direction, going back and forth, they came back to Paray, and they told him what they saw. Yidden are not coming back. And you know something? I don't know if they know where they're going. They're just going back and forth. They're going in a circle.
Is that why it's taken 40 years to cross the desert?
At that time, so Paray, as the Rebbe said, Paray deduced from this that Eden are lost, they don't really know where they're going. And he decided that he is going to bring them back. This is in itself, we have to think into this and understand, just try to understand what type of mentality this is. After having been smitten in such a drastic way, and yet he still finds it in his mind to go and chase after them. The Pasuk says, "Vaychazik Hashem esleif Paray." Hashem hardened or strengthened Paray's heart. But that strengthening of Paray's heart was only to give him the moral strength to go and follow through on his plan, to chase after them. But the idea of chasing after them, this he had on his own. What kind of thing is this?
I don't know, maybe like I didn't understand it right, but from the way the conversation was in the Chumash, it seemed like he wanted his money back. Is there any like, it's like, we just let them go with all our money?
No.
All our gold and silver?
That you got not from the Chumash but from Rashi.
Rashi, yeah.
But the Pasuk says, "May avdeinu." We sent Eden out. We led them out of the hook from serving us, from working for us. That was, they wanted to subjugate them back. That was the primary thing. In addition to that, one of the enticements, one of the reasons, one of the ways that Paray was able to convince his people to come along and said, look, in addition to all that, they took all your money. So that's how he was able to gather them all together. And as I pointed out, we have to notice that the idea to chase Eden was his own. This came on his own. This was not a Chazak Hashem. Hashem hardened his heart. Hashem only gave him the strength and the boldness to go and follow through and do it. And I'll come back to this just for an insight to understand how a mind like this works. And Paray gathered all the power that he had and chased after Eden, and they caught up with them quite quickly. Rashi says that they caught up with him in one day.
This was the third day? Sorry.
No. The seventh day. Right? They went 3 days the Eden went, and 3 days the agents returned, and in one day he chased after them. So they caught up with the Eden, and here Eden looked back and they saw the Egyptians, the Mitzrayim, chasing after them. They were caught in a terrible bind. They were kind of sandwiched in between Paray on one hand and the sea on the other hand. And here came the big dilemma. The Eden were at a loss what to do. And the Medrash tells us, based on certain psukim, that 4 different groups formed in the Jewish camp at that time. There was one group that said, no more room here. Can you see how we can make one more room for a very worthy cause? Squeeze a little bit.
Use your staff. No, use your staff.
There's always room for one more. Okay. One group said, let us pack up and go back to Mitzrayim. Be no challenge to them, and go back to Mitzrayim. Another group said, let us pick up arms and go and fight them.
What is the first group say, Rabbi?
Go back, return. Go fight them. Another group said, we're lost, we don't want to go back to Mitzrayim, that's out of the question, that's impossible to fight them, it's further impossible, we're just going to jump into the sea. Just to save ourselves from servitude, let us at least die as free men, so to speak. Another group said, no, let us pray, let us ask Hashem for help. Examining these 4 groups, we can understand where each one is coming from. Each one has a logical base for having that approach. And they were basically, right or wrong, but they were decent ideas. They made sense. But the bottom line is, as the Medrash says, all 4 were wrong. And Hashem said to Moshe, cancel all of that and just tell the Yidden that they should continue to travel just as they did till now. Ignore the entire situation. Continue to do what they were doing. And when they will reach the Yam Suf will split open for them and they'll just go through it. But they have nothing to worry about. They shouldn't even consider what to do. They just follow the line. What actually transpired over here? And we learn in the Chumash itself clearly that this entire occurrence, this entire meetup with the Mitzrayim was all planned. But construed was planned by Hashem. The Yidden came out from Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim represented a klipa. It's called a klipa. What is the klipa? It represented a state of being where godliness could not be recognized. Mitzrayim represented Avodah Zarah at the lowest level. and they actually worshiped the powers of nature. They were so steeped, so convinced of the powers of nature, with inability even after they are shown all of the miracles that they have experienced, and they experienced them not only by seeing them, but it was tested on their own skin. They actually themselves suffered, and yet they could not break out of it. They were still steeped in this, and nature, and the limits of nature, this was the only reality that they could relate to. This is why, as we see from the fact that Paro, after that he was forced by a godly force to let Eden out and to send Eden out of Mitzrayim, he was still not convinced, and he decided to chase after the Eden. He could not accept the thought that there is something, some kind of a power, something that can overrule his principle that everything has to work according to nature. Yes, it happened, he made this miracle, but basically the reality remains the same. And therefore he decided, let me chase after them. We see what it means to be steeped in Avodah Zorah, to be steeped in a perception, a worldly perception that does not permit, doesn't allow you to rise out and to, so to speak, to emerge from the waters and see the light and see something different. This reminds me, as an aside, of the story I told you recently, maybe a week or two ago. I told you the story of the Rebbe Rashab, that he has met one a Jewish apikoros, a Yid who was strayed away from Yiddishkeit. He was a learned man, the Achad Ha'am, he was a very learned man, and he even had a Torah background, a deep Torah background. This was in the time of the Rebbe Rashab, there was this type of movement. And he was also a distant relative, a distant cousin of the Rebbe. So they met one time. You may remember the story I told you. They met one time, and after a time that they spent together, they each were asked to make a comment about the other. So the Rebbe said about this Achad Ha'am, he said a real amazing thing. He said that if this Achad Ha'am were to stand by the Yamsuf and observe with his own eyes how the Eden come to the Yamsuf, the Yamsuf is flowing in a normal way, and Moshe lifts his arm with the staff and swings it, and the Yam splits and Eden go through, and then the Egyptians follow, and the Eden come out, and the Egyptians drown, and he observes it all with his own eyes. What do you think would happen? He would not change a bit. He would remain the same apikoros. That's what I said.
That's a real
It's possible to be so drowned as to being incapable of rising out of.
That's the Israeli government.
Yeah, but how can it be? It's like
I'll explain it.
if he says it.
So Paro demonstrated a very similar state, quality. It chases after the Eden after going through close to a year of being warned and proven, even forced to let him out, and yet he chases after them. He couldn't break out of it. Now, the Yidden, the Jewish people, they were also submerged in the culture of Mitzrayim. But because of their inherent Jewish soul, because the deep emunah that Eden had deep down in their soul, they were able to break out of it. But the breaking out of it also had to happen through various stages. It wasn't a quick turn of events. Basically, as we know, there were three major stages. There was the stage when Eden first left Mitzrayim, and Pharaoh threw them out, but they were chased out of Mitzrayim. They were forced out, so to speak. They had to run away. And as Chassidus explains, the principle of running away meant that they had to make a break with Mitzrayim without contemplation. What contemplation means? Without reflection. Because if they should reflect what we're doing, they couldn't do it. They had to run out because it was so steep there. They had to make a break, a kind of a break by force. They had to force themselves out of it. Then out. Then there was the second major point of Kriyas Yamsuf, which we'll discuss now. And then there's the third major event that changed them completely. This was at Kabbalah Torah, Mamed Har Sinai, which you'll learn in Mitzvah next week.
What was the second event?
Yamsuf, Kriyas Yamsuf. Now, the fact that Eden, and here is going to be a little bit of a subtle Indian. I have to be careful, to understand what the point is. The fact that Eden had, we said, these four groups, and each one of the groups had a solid rationale for what they are suggesting we should do, meant in fact that they did break away from Egypt. They made this break. Except that now that they are in this dilemma, they were looking for a rational way, a resolution to the situation. And even to the point where there was a group that says, no, we don't have to do any of the above, we just have to ask Hashem to help us, which is clearly a very high level. In that state of affairs, it's a very high level to say all you have to do is pray.
It's not like delusional. It's not delusional.
Delusional?
Yeah. It's not like saying we think that if we pray really hard, the IDF soldiers are not going to take us out of their houses. It's not a type of delusion. Like it seems really desperate. Let's just pray.
Delusion is possible for an individual to delude himself in his own life. But when a person has, even an individual who is capable of deluding himself, when he has a family with children that depend on him, and he sees not only his children, he sees there's a whole nation there, that is such a reality that he is not prepared for delusion. He has to look for real solutions. And if he comes up and says that we have to pray, that means that he truly recognizes deep down in his soul that Hashem is here, and Hashem listens to his prayer, and that Hashem is capable and will help him. The question, the suggestion, what you're saying, the illusional, the idea itself, you have to be very careful in examining an idea, if one recognizes the reality, he recognizes the godly reality, and he believes and he recognizes that there is a real soul, godly soul in him, and God is something which is very real, and he's then standing in this unfathomable, so to speak, predicament. The idea of delusion will not even come up as a possibility, because he knows that it's real. See, delusion, I can't blame you for suggesting it, because it's all over us. Delusion is a suggestion that comes from a doubt in the whole reality of it. So yes, religion is very nice. It gives color to your life. But that's real. This is the way you live. No, you have to live. You have to live with worldly reality. You can't delude yourself in your moral values. But we, the Torah, teaches us, and we believe very strongly, not only believe, but we recognize it intellectually, that this is a reality. This is not just a nice moral idea. And therefore the idea of delusion doesn't come up. The question is what is the right thing to do under the circumstances? Yeah. An illusion, when you use an illusion to control you, to direct you, is called delusion. You delude yourself. You fool yourself. You dilute. You fool yourself. You mislead yourself. You tell yourself a story that is not so.
And I believe in this.
And you believe in it because you want to believe in it, not because you really believe in it. That's called delusion. Okay, understand? You look in dictionary. Go ahead.
EILL.
We'll come back to this. I want to go to the point, and then we'll take up the various ideas that may come up. So the Yidden, as I said, had sound approaches. But all of these approaches, including the idea of praying to Hashem, was rejected by Moshe. He said, no, this is not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to completely ignore the situation, ignore the Egyptians, and just follow through on the path that you were set to go. Now, the question is, okay, so you have another idea, but what makes the others wrong? You can have 5 ideas. The answer is that this 5th idea is not really an idea that can be constructed by human mind. It's beyond rationale. Where are you going? You can't ignore the situation. You have to deal with the situation. As I said, there's going to be a subtle point, and I'd like you to pay attention and try to understand the point here. So that the Medrash does not say there were 5 different opinions, 5 different ideas. There were 4. Because the 4 ideas are ideas that arose from human thought, from logic, from an intellectual approach to the situation. The 5th idea that Moshe Rabbeinu said is not an idea that emerged, that arose from the intellect, from the human intellect. There's no way that a human being can, from his intellect, construct such an idea. This is something which comes from a different source. This was, in fact, something that Hashem directed Moshe to do, from a different source. In order for the Yidden to experience this alternative, this totally different approach that Moshe Rabbeinu gave them, this is why they were led into this situation. This is the purpose. This is why they were led into the situation in the first place. And this is what was accomplished at the Yam Suf. Now I'll try to explain what this is about. As Yidden were left Mitzrayim, and they broke away from Mitzrayim. In breaking away from Mitzrayim, just like in truth, any experience that a person has when he breaks away from something evil to something negative, our Baal Tshuva recognizes that the lifestyle that he's involved is negative and meaningless, and he wants to break away from this. You're breaking away from something that you recognize, as I said, is meaningless, and you can't tolerate this empty life, and you're running away from it. As you're running away from it, you're essentially experiencing, essentially recognizing the emptiness of the life of the union that you're running away from. And as long as you're still running away from it, that itself is an indicator that you have not broken completely with it. You still recognize it, you still understand it, you still relate to it, and still pushing away and running away from it. when you make a dramatic step where you're no longer, in effect, running away from the negative, but you have found and recognized the truth of where you're running to, then you're no longer running away. You're no longer fighting the enemy. Now you found what you're looking for. And now your effort is only to get more and more involved and understand the truth that you have found. And the truth that you have found becomes a reality in itself. You don't need to be pushing away from something because you found you're involved in something real in its own. To recognize the reality of this new found truth, that is very difficult. Particularly if you're coming from a background of Mitzrayim, where you were steeped in the idea that nature is the only reality. And then you come and you have to come out from this and rise out of this and recognize nature. Nature is a non-reality at all. It's all godliness. It's supernatural. So to relate to godliness, to that which is not only not natural, but cannot even be understood from a natural perspective, there is a breakthrough. It's not a smooth sail. It's not a smooth move. There's a break. And this break took place at Har Sinai. At the Kriyas Yam Suf. They were standing here. They were wedged between the Mitzrayim and the Yam Suf. And they were in their full mind. They were fully resolute to continue to not to break away, not to go back to Mitzrayim, or not to acquiesce to that, not to destroy themselves. But they were looking for a resolution to the problem based on the best that a human mind can produce. The idea is that the best that the human mind can produce. And here they were taught a new insight, a new recognition. Yes, indeed, there's a human mind, and the human mind can have very fine ideas. But you have to know that the real truth is higher than the human mind. And the real truth that you are to relate to is not what the human mind tells, not what's rational, not what's logical, but what is God's will. And this was, so to speak, the shortcoming, if you can call it that. This was the mistake of all four opinions, even though there was a big difference between the opinions of going back to Egypt or standing to pray or finding them. They're all very different opinions. But this was a common error. I said an error in quotes, of all four opinions, in that they didn't recognize that what they're supposed to do really is ask Moshe what to do. This was the mistake. They have rejected, so to speak, the natural world of Mitzrayim. And now they have to break away from it completely and say, oh yeah, my mind says this, my mind says this. But that's not the question, what your mind says. The question is, what is the truth? What does God want? And therefore the right approach, so to speak, what was it supposed to do, like in our own lives? on a different stage and so forth. But nevertheless, when we have a question, what do? We don't scratch our heads. We open the Shulchan Aruch. We ask a Rav. Because the idea is not what makes sense, but what does God want. This was their first lesson, first exposure to that level of experience. That broke them away from Egypt completely. Up until then, they were running away from Egypt. And they recognized the Egyptians as a reality, they have power. And now we have to deal with them and know what to do. At this point, they broke away completely. Like Kriyas Yamsuf, Kriyas Yamsuf is considered the conclusion of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because up until that time, they haven't really left Mitzrayim in the real sense of the word. They were still pushing away from them. Now, Kriyas Yamsuf, they had a complete and a categorical break with them. Where they recognized a new reality that they stepped into. The reality of Hashem, and their whole world is being now reinterpreted and explained and viewed from a completely different perspective. What does Hashem want? We can readily see the significance of this, how this is extremely significant to each one of us, whether one is a Baal Tshuva, or one is a lifer, because we're all Baalei Tshuva. A person throughout his lifetime, as long as he has an active mind, as long as he's alive and he pursues an intellectual pursuit, there is always that which he is growing out of and that which he is growing into. And one has to know that growing out of is only a first step. The more difficult step is growing into. Leaving Mitzrayim was difficult enough, but nothing compared to standing there by the Yamsuf and just following Moshe into the sea. That is the real step. We have the analogy for this. A person is walking up a staircase, walking up steps. So he's standing on one step with both his feet. He's pretty solid, feels comfortable. Then he decides, okay, but I'm bored over here. I want to go up. Well, bored. I mean, in a quizzical way. Time to rise upwards. I see the limits of this. I want to go up. So what does he do? Picks up one foot. When he picks up one foot and puts it on the next step, he's only testing the ground. Because he's still standing solid on the previous step. To make this first step is relatively easy. Oh, it seems good, it seems pleasant, it's bright over there, looking up there, oh wow, beautiful. It is when he has to pick up the next foot and to raise it up to where he has now stepped into, that's when the real challenge comes. You have to dissociate yourself completely from before and begin living on a new level. Disconnect. Begin living on a new level. and recognizing a new reality. And that has to be done gradually, has to be done very solidly, very carefully. But this is when the real change takes place. This is when the change takes place, when we realize not only that where I was is not the complete truth, and I want to get away from this, but that I am willing and able to join in and rise up to a different truth. We all see the world. We all recognize, everyone who has any thought, any intelligent thought, recognizes that the world, as great and beautiful as it is, does not supply, so to speak, a purposeful life for a human being. Nobody will say that human life is worth it just because the soup tastes good.
Rabbi, I might
Sopa
say
sabe rico. La sopa sabe rico.
I mean, like, if nothing else, at least the soup tastes good.
The problem is when not even the soup is good.
Nobody, certainly he will not argue to others, he'll be too embarrassed. But to himself, he's not going to say, it's okay, life is worth living, worth struggling. Tomorrow morning I'm going to have a good soup. Just to recognize the shallowness of the world that we live in. There was a while ago I heard an advertisement for coffee, for a certain coffee brand, and there was a maiden song, and the song said the best thing of getting up in the morning is coffee in your cup.
Folgers in your
It's
cup.
Folgers in your cup.
The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
Oh.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that, Rabbi. Everyone knows that. For you, it's something new, but we were raised on that song. That's ingrained in our psyche.
Like, I remember that commercial when I was like 7 years old, 8 years old. You know,
Okay.
That's the second thing I think right
So
after
it's not-
Moedeyani.
And this is after Mariani and not before.
Moedeyani, and then between that and Negelvas is the best part.
All right. What Hashem, we have a little left. You understand? We have to reflect and understand the world we live in, the shallowness. This is basic. This is basic. Everyone understands, realizes how misleading this is. And it becomes misleading not because it makes sense and can mislead you. It's misleading because everybody heard it. So it becomes, so to speak, it becomes part of the culture. But we have to understand, this is total stupidity. I don't have another way to describe it. It's reducing the human being to absolutely nothing. I don't begrudge you a good cup of coffee. Don't say that. This is why I'm getting up. What?
I had lost so many cups of coffee today. I'm like,
You're right. So I said, everyone recognizes, everyone realizes this is very low. I mean, everyone at their own level recognize that there has to be something meaningful in life, and you're trying, so to speak, to find it and rise out of it. But while you're rising out of it, you don't really give up on the other thing. Yeah, the reality is what what I was steeped in. The reality is the world itself. But in addition to that, I have something also meaningful. That occasionally I can tell myself I'm doing something good. The real test and the real requirement is to grow out of it. Imagine.
It's change, yeah? Like
It's a complete change.
It's about change.
Complete breakthrough. Imagine a child is playing with a doll.
It's about change.
A child is playing with a doll. A doll.
A doll.
Like a little baby.
A doll, right? And to the child, this doll is a real, cuddles it, it's a baby, and feeds it, and whatever it is, it's a real thing. Excuse me? Yeah. It's a real thing. And he has an emotional attachment to this doll. When a person grows up, hopefully, he recognizes that this is, as we call child's play. This is not real. And if you want to have, and so to speak, an emotion of this type, you have to have a real child, not a doll. And if a person goes back and says, "Yeah, a real child will do that," a doll is also interesting. You would say, this person has never grown up. He's still in his diapers. That would be tragic. The person has to grow up to the point where he's completely out of that stage. The similar thing that is in spiritual growth, in rising out of what we call the limits, the worldly limits, rising out of the perception that the natural world, this is the reality. We have to rise up and recognize that which we all understand, but we have to rise to it and say, no. Yes, the natural world is there, but the natural world itself is a creation, and itself was created for a purpose. And the real thing that exists is the purpose for which it was created. Not itself at all. And therefore, when I relate to it, when I have any kind of interaction, any kind of connection to it, I connect to the purpose for which it was created, rather than to the creation itself. And in that itself, there are many levels, obviously. But in each level, each one of us has to understand that it is not a rise unless you bring both feet together up. If you remain attached to where you were before, and you don't want to let go, no matter how much you understand further out, you are not recognizing it as a reality. You're still essentially in Mitzrayim. And Hashem has construed this plan at the time when Eden left Mitzrayim. And Hashem challenges and tests each one of us. Each one of us. Hashem takes care of each one of us and makes sure that we're all given the challenge, the opportunity to recognize that it's time to break away. Very often, a bocher or a man, one of us, you learn, you come with full enthusiasm into yeshiva and you start learning, and the enthusiasm is because you feel that you're running away from Egypt. You're pushing away Egypt. You feel the great enthusiasm. I want to get out of that. And then you start learning, and you kind of lose your enthusiasm. And you don't know why. And the simple reason is because Hashem is leading you on now. You were running away from Egypt, that's one thing. Now you have to run into this. You have to find a meaning in Torah itself, not only as an antidote. You want an antidote? A contrast, an opposite to Mitzrayim, but as a value on its own. Finding the godly light, finding the godly perception within Torah itself, within Yiddishkeit, not only as a contrast to the negative. This is a process in our lives, in human life in general, and particularly for Torah, and particularly Chassidim. This is an ongoing process. And as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that any time a person sees, he finds that he can't get himself aroused, he can't get himself enthusiastic to do something of Torah mitzvahs. It is a godly plan to bring him to a deeper and a greater conviction and greater dedication. Because as long as he's still 1 foot in Mitzrayim, he's not going to be able to reach completely into the other state. One final thing I want to say on this parsha, something which I repeated in the past, but it's just because it's in our parsha, it's a very interesting aspect that is so blatant and open. What was that? When Eden, after Kriyas Yamsuf, when Eden came across the Yamsuf, came out, then it says that Moshe led the Eden away from the Yamsuf, and they went towards the Har Sinai. So it says over there in the Posik that they went 3 days without water. They didn't find any water for 3 days.
It's fatal.
Huh?
That's fatal.
Then they came to Morah, to a place called Morah. And there was water, but the water was bitter. They couldn't drink the water because it was bitter. So then they gathered up and complained to Moshe.
What, salt water?
I don't know.
Bad water.
I don't know. It says it was bitter. Morah. They couldn't drink the water because it was very bitter. So they started complaining to Moshe. What are we going to drink? There's no water. And Moshe asked Hashem, and Hashem showed him a tree, a wood, and he was able to throw into the water and sweeten the water, and they were able to drink the water. That's what the Torah relates. So, the blatant question that comes out, the obvious question, that they're going 3 days in the desert. 3 days in the desert. Understand, the desert is a pretty warm place. 3 days they're walking through a desert, no water at all, no trace of it, no complaints. They're going, there's no complaints. They come to this place that does have water, except the water isn't tasty. Or maybe it's more than not tasty, it's bitter. All of a sudden, they complain. What happened in 3 days when there was no water at all?
No complaints.
No complaints.
Nothing to complain about. Wow.
So one saw in the Pirush It's not from Rav Sicha, it's a Pirush on the Chumash, but a nice insight. When Eden came out of Mitzrayim, and they came out of the Har Sinai, particularly as we explained, they came out from not Har Sinai, from the Yam Suf. They had already recognized Hashem's presence completely in their lives, and they had 100% reliance on Hashem. They didn't think about a natural process at all. They didn't think we need water to drink. Who says we need water to drink? We're going in the desert and nothing is hurting us. We feel comfortable. Whoever thought of water? We just follow Hashem, follow Moshe's lead, and we follow Hashem. And the thought that they are experiencing a unnatural lifestyle didn't even occur to them. They didn't even think of it because they're following Moshe. They came tomorrow and they see water and they said, "What's this? Water? Wow! Wait a second, we need water." What happened all the time? Without water, how are we surviving? Now all of a sudden, they jump back and say, "No, we can't live like this. We need a natural means of life." Which is another lesson that Hashem is teaching them, another lesson that we all have to also take to heart. That sometimes we, because of our fear, so to speak, because of our attachment to natural phenomena, natural needs, we create a need where there is none. That's the way it has to be. So again, we have to understand this has to be taken in context and has to be understood, in a proper way. But we also have to understand that the capacity that there is in this world, the capacity that Hashem has put into the world, is such that we can follow through and accomplish everything that we need to accomplish, no matter what the circumstances. We can literally follow through and accomplish everything we want to accomplish. And this has borne through, in Russia we suffered all kinds of things, but even in this America, I just want to say a final note, since we're living in America. In America, in the previous century, in the beginning of the century, the big nisoyan in America was Shabbos. Now things have changed completely, but in those days, Shabbos was a must work day, and if a Yid wanted to keep Shabbos, it was close to impossible for him to have a job. I know this firsthand, not from myself, but from my wife's grandparents who were here in those years. And this created a very, very difficult challenge, very difficult situation. The minute your employer heard you're not coming back, no matter what you're doing, you may be a floor washer, a dish, makes no difference. Makes no difference how important you are or not. If you don't come tomorrow, don't bother coming Sunday. This is the way it was. And we have numerous stories of this type. And as difficult as it was, the fact remains that those Yidden who would not give in survived. They all survived. It wasn't easy. But they all survived, and they all raised families. And they raised families who belonged to the Jewish people, who didn't get lost. And never those who did not have that resolute stance, who gave in, they lost their own Shabbos Nebuch, and they lost their families. They didn't have. This was like a break in the whole chain. This is what we have now. The big Baal Tshuva movement, the group now. And this is going out already for 50 years. This is all from those children who have not been given any kind of Shabbos, any kind of Yiddishkeit, because their parents have succumbed to the circumstance. So the only point I'm going to make, Baruch Hashem, this is all behind us, but each one of us has our individual challenge and nisyonos. We have to know that everything is, we can overcome. Even if it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't have to make sense. We have to follow through and ask what the Shulchan Aruch tells us, what Hashem wants us to do, and that is what's going to happen. And this is how we are going to pull ourselves out of our own little Mitzrayim, and this is how we're going to bring ourselves to Kriyas Yamsuf and break away from Mitzrayim. This is how we're all going to receive the Torah. This is how we're all going to come to Eretz Yisrael, and we'll receive Mashiach.
Amen.